Hey yo, what's up guys? Terrell here on Terrell Game Vlogs here to bring you Monster Musume episode 2 review. Fuck you, phone. So this episode probably has more of the controversial stuff and gets into how the anime is going to be handling things like fan service, whether there's going to be a Blu-ray uncensored version, which there obviously is going to be, and it's obviously the version you might want to watch because this episode really outlined how they were handling it. Now, to be honest, there's really no amazing way to handle fan service, so they essentially took it the best way they possibly could. Because this is literally the best way you can do a censoring without it being fucking obnoxious. Like blacking out half of the damn screen. Or like what they do with JoJo and Gore. Or do the stupid white high beams or black bars, whatever the fuck you want to do. The point is, they didn't make it where it's obvious that you're going out of your way to censor shit. Because it was jarring as hell in those animes. What they decided to do for the most part seems to be the zoom in effect. Meaning they take an ecchi scene, like for example when Poppy and Mia are fighting this episode, in those scenes you see her wrap her tail around Poppy. Well, Poppy's naked, and the whole focus with Poppy instead of, you know, the breast thing, which is with Centauria and Mia, it's like the ass thing with Poppy. There's like an ass shot where she's like naked, but like Mia's tail just happens to be covering the right parts of her ass. That's zoomed in. There's way more to that scene that you can tell the scene is zoomed in. The same thing with like Poppy ripping Mia's clothes. Like in any other ecchi, they would have drew attention to the fact that she just happened to rip her shirt in a way that only shows that exposes her breasts of all things. So you can tell they're going the whole we're gonna zoom in. Actually, the first episode had some hints of this. The first episode did more jump cuts than anything. Like for example, I think it was the scene where I think I mentioned this in the last episode review, but it's the whole scene when they're in the dressing room and you're doing a pan down shot of Mio taking off her clothes, and it just skips her breast and goes straight down to her waist and then stops right before she gets to her crotch. So they're doing the zoom in effect. Centauria's scenes is about the same thing. Poppy, the way they handled her nudity was literally just finding roundabout ways of showing it. And a lot of people are curious, is the Blu-ray version going to just show her naked, or is the Blu-ray version... The only thing I can see the Blu-ray version really changing is that they'll zoom out the nudity scenes. I don't think they're going to go out of their way and re-edit shit, because this probably has the more alterations to how the manga went than the first episode. For example, a lot of Poppy stuff, the way Poppy stuff is even written was weird. For example, in the anime, and I thought this may be an English translation thing they're going with. No, they just made up some shit. In any other translations besides the anime, Poppy calls Kurusu boss or husband. She has never called him master, but that's the term they went with here. I don't know why they went with it here, but they called so Poppy calls him master in the anime for whatever reason. A few other scenes that were changed. They completely took out the scene in which she's eating the popsicle. Now, obviously, there's still... And granted, it's not one of those scenes you need to have in there, but, you know, if you're an ecchi fan, I guess it's going to piss you off. Because in the actual anime, you hear her making all the noises, but you don't see her eating it. And in the manga, you see her eating it, and it's overly seductive in the way she's eating it. They essentially just have her still making the noises without actually showing the animation. Some people think they're gonna just put the animation in there. I think that's honestly be too much work for like 5 seconds of footage. There are a few changes to how the episode plays out. For example, when he first meets Poppy and they're having that conversation, there's a sexual gag she makes, like when she's saying Poppy the harpy, and she's fucking that up. She actually ends up saying like penis at some point. Well, at least in the American translation, she accidentally says penis, which makes sense because Poppy has a gag of being overly, she knows way too much considering how airheaded she is. It's kind of funny. I do like the fact that they over-exaggerated the whole 3 steps and she forgets shit, because that's referenced later on in the manga a lot more prevalent than it is here. Like in the actual chapter in which it's introduced, like she barely... It's such a non-factor that no one would have noticed that they didn't put it in there about the whole 3 steps and she forgets shit. They changed how he falls from the tree. He actually hurts his leg. They never show that. Even the way she thinks about trying to go save the girl. Like, in the manga, she says something along the lines of like, she does say something stupid like not pecking the tree, but she says something about doing pretty much getting her down the wrong way. But the way she finds out about her wings being wet is that in the anime they make it sound like she recognized what the problem was. In the manga, she didn't know what the problem was. She just kind of went, "Oh, my wings are wet. I guess I can't fly." Like that's what she says in the manga. And even the scene in which she crashes on Kurusu at the end and you get that ass shot, they completely the scene kind of nerfs the ass shot, if anything, which I don't understand. But because if you in the manga, you can see like her ass way better than in the anime. Yes, I have gone back and I have analyzed the fuck out of this. Centaurus has like maybe one or two textual edits. For example, the scene in which he tries to ride her in the anime, they decide to make him bleed from the forehead when she almost kicks him in the face. I don't understand what the blood was supposed to do. What's the point of even showing him bleeding? Whatever. And then the scene in which he asks like, well, how the hell am I supposed to ride you? There's supposed to be an awkward pause where she recognizes the problem. In the anime, they just completely skip it. He says it and then they just jump scenes. And the only other scene that they skip is the scenes where they zoom in, which is him fondling her breasts. Which I don't know if I would say he zoomed in. They zoomed in. Like some sections it looks like they zoomed in, and other sections it looks like they just completely omitted stuff. Like in the manga, he's like doing full on like titty twisters and every fucking thing. And then even in the anime, and even at the end where she recognizes that he just felt her up, she's like filling herself up. Well, the anime shows it, but it's zoomed in. So once again, we have a lot of zoom in censoring, which is probably the least annoying censoring. I don't really mind the censoring. I do think some of the edits were dumb. As far as their introductions, it feels kind of weak in the sense that, because see, Mia, when she's introduced, she gets a full episode to herself. I can see people being like, why the hell is Poppy and Centaura introduced so damn quickly after each other? And in the manga, it's like that, because that's literally how they're introduced, literally back to back. It's like Mia has one chapter, and then you introduce Poppy, and then you introduce Centaura, and then the next chapter is like a Poppy / Centaura chapter, which leads into the horny chapter, is what I like to call it, or the beginning of the marriage shit. Which brings up the problem I have with this episode more than anything, which is the preview. We also found out that this anime is confirmed to only have 12 episodes, which is fine because I figured it was if you were doing 2 chapters a fucking episode. And then we get to the preview of this episode. That bothers me. Why? Because if you see the preview for this episode, now as I said, 2 chapters an episode, so that means this episode covered 3 and 4. So you think the next episode is going to cover 5 and 6. Well, when you look at the preview for the next episode, I only saw scenes from chapter 6. That bothers me because that makes it seem like they're not going to animate chapter 5. And people will go, it's just a preview, but why would you only preview half of the damn episode? If they are doing both parts in the episode, then you wouldn't do chapter 5. Then you would show at least 1 or 2 scenes from chapter 5, like they did with this like they did with the preview for this episode. The preview for this episode and the first episode showed Centaura and Poppy. For whatever reason, in episode 3's preview, I only see shit from chapter 6, which means there's a possibility they might skip chapter 5, which I really hope they don't do, because I feel like that would be a huge misstep for a few reasons. The first thing is, chapter 5 and 6 are actually one of the few chapters that actually flow into each other nicely. Like, chapter 5 flows into 6 really well, so it doesn't make any sense to skip it. Second of all, I don't think chapter 6 is good enough to be... Chapter 6 doesn't make sense in itself to just animate chapter 6. Unless what I think they might do, which is throw in elements of chapter 5 into chapter 6, which you can't really do effectively. I'm not going to spoil it for anime-only watchers, but I have a paranoid feeling that they're not going to fully adapt chapter 5 next week. I feel like what they're going to do is they're either going to half-ass adapt chapter 5 or not adapt it at all and do chapter 6 for a straight episode. And see, that brings up a bigger problem in itself. If they only adapt chapter 6 next week, that makes me think that they might start skipping episodes that have nothing to do, they don't introduce new girls. Because I think we go like another, is it another chapter? I think we have like another chapter that has nothing to do with a new girl after 6, which is the Mia cooking thing. I'm not gonna go into it because I don't want to spoil for anime fans, but the Mia, the cooking thing, the scales thing, that's the next chapter after the horny chapter, and then Sue is introduced. So Sue would come in on the second half of the 4th episode. If they're skipping chapters, I don't see the point of it because they're not pushing Sue any quicker unless they're going to just completely skip the like Mia shit and just do Sue's full thing. And see, the good news is that when it comes to Sue and Mero, their shit leads into each other, so I don't think that they will skip anything for those two because their chapters literally lead into each other. Like Sue's introduced, you get the chapter kind of about how Sue is, and in that same chapter, Mero's introduced. So I'm pretty sure they're not going to skip anything Mero or Sue related. I'm worried about them skipping development chapters because the Mia chapter is a good Mia development chapter, and next week, if it in chapter 5 is a good Poppy / Centauria chapter. So I'm just like, don't skip those chapters because you already have a pretty basic ass premise. You don't need to be taking away the little bit of heart the show has. The show, one of the things I like about Monster Musume is the fact that it's really balanced with its girls, and it develops all of its girls having their various quirks and personalities. There's good Poppy and Centauria moments in chapter 5. So the fact that I'm only seeing clips from chapter 6 makes me, and I don't know why you would adapt only chapter 6 anyway, because the chapter 6, for those who want to know, is like heavily focused on fan service. Like there's a lot of sexual innuendos, like Poppy's nakedness, Centaurus breasts, Mia's lamiasness. That's another thing I want to bring up. The scene that I think the picture everyone almost has seen of this anime, or at least of this series, is the scene with Mia having her tongue stuck out. Well, in the clip show for the next episode preview, they show her smiling, like they show that scene in which she would stick her tongue out, and her tongue wasn't stuck elongated, like a Lamia's tongue would be, as an elongated tongue. Which means I really hope they didn't nerf her tongue length, because there's no reason to do that. I might be over-exaggerating here, but this is just stuff I saw in the episode. The episode by itself is fine. I don't care for some of the weird edits they did, but the weird edits they did don't take away from the episode at all. I still enjoyed. Centauria is one of my favorite girls. I just find her adorable. She's like one of those tomboyish girls who doesn't understand that she's a girl sometimes. So like when she has her girly moments, it makes her cute. Poppy has, for some reason, I like her more in the anime than I did in the manga. And I don't hate Poppy in the manga. I just was indifferent to her in the manga. I actually think Poppy works well when she's with Sue. She doesn't really, and she's still enjoyable by herself. So I'll say this: I like Poppy. Poppy's kind of grown on me. Me, I'm still pretty indifferent towards overall because of Mia's character type doesn't work. Well, at least the way Mia does it doesn't work. But she has her moments. Like, I don't hate any of the girls. But yeah, the episode has a lot of censoring, random changes to the manga, which already bothers me because there's too many random changes in the manga compared to the first episode. The first episode was literally a one-to-one adaptation, minus like one scene, like 1 or 2 scenes. This one was obviously more heavily edited, so I'm like, please don't let them start getting reckless. And if they skip chapter 5 and we're on episode 3, I worry about how the rest of the series is going to go. If they stick to the way it should go, the anime should end on chapter 24, which is fine because that leads out of an arc. If they don't do that and they start skipping around and shit, they better not even touch that arc. And knowing them, they'll probably change it. Which they really don't need to because the arc was pretty simple in the first place. Hope they don't change it, but I have a sneaking suspicion they might, or they might start throwing away the episodes that mean shit. Because usually in harems, one of the things that people have a tendency of doing is intentionally speeding through shit to get to the other girls. Well, I'm like, and considering that manga already naturally throws in the first 3 girls within the first 4 chapters, it's like you don't really need to rush because Sue is literally maybe an episode. I think she's going to be in episode 4, period. Sue will show up in episode 4, and Meryl will be in episode 5. Like, so by the time you get to Sue and Meryl, you're not even halfway through the damn series yet. The only girl who comes in later is like Rachira, who I don't think comes in until like episode 8, which makes me worry because I feel like, which actually would be pretty good comedic timing to have her come in at episode 8, because 8, she's an arachnid. Fucking terrible. But yeah, I hope. I hope they stick to the the 2 chapters per episode and don't start deviating and shit. As long as they don't start deviating, we'll be good. But if they fucking deviate, and next week will tell me if they're doing it or not. If I do not see chapter 5 represented in next week, that tells me that they're gonna start deviating. And this is episode 3, guys. If they start deviating in episode 3, I'm like, bro, we're done. Because they're gonna fuck it up. Unless, I mean, you can still redeem that, but still, the fact that you skipped it just would bother me anyway. Because it's a good development chapter, so yeah. Episode right now, fine, but I fear for next week, depending on where it goes, because there's only scenes of chapter 6 in the preview, and that bothers me. Also, now that I think about it, there is no scene from chapter 5 we've seen in previews for the anime period. Even though we've seen previews for Sue, who is introduced in chapter, I think, 8. So I'm like, and also I don't remember seeing any scenes for chapter 7, which is Mia's chapter. Oh, please don't let them skip those. Because then I'm just like, because then that like takes away half of the fun of the series. Unless they're going to move it around, which might aggravate me because chapter 5, you can't without changing some of the context of the end of it. Chapter 7, you could, but it leads into Sue's introduction so well, you don't really need to. Like, the shit leads into each other well enough where it's like, you don't need to change it. Don't fucking change it. But we'll see. So, good episode. I'm just worried now. But please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. This has been the Vlogs again for your boy Terrell, and I will catch you guys later. Peace off.